Introduction. Alan Fiske, an anthropologist at the University of California, Los Angeles, believes that human mind has separate systems for calculating exchanges between different types of people. People switch very different modes of exchange depending on whom they were dealing with. There are three models. The first one they use in Wall Street, the second one between family members, and the third one between friends and peers.
One of Fiske's models is called market pricing. It's a cold-blooded monetary system which describes the mode of exchange between people. Rational economists assume people use this model for most of their decisions. They use a set of ideas called game theory to explain their take on how people think and act during negotiations. Decisions are made through mathematical logic. There are two examples that demonstrate game theory. The first one is called Prisoner's Dilemma. This example is about two crooks being suspected of a crime and held in different rooms. The attorney gives them two options, to either remain silent or to confess. The best outcome for both would be if both cooperate and say nothing. But if both are defecting each other, the outcome is much worse. And if one person says nothing and their partner confesses, the outcome is way worse for the first person. So the outcome depends a lot on your partner. From a rational economist's point of view, the best decision in this dilemma is to defect. It gives you a relatively better payoff regardless of what your partner decides to do. A second example is called the ultimatum game. In this game, you are given a sum of money that you need to split between yourself and another person. You can choose on your own how much money you want to keep or give, but the other player can say no to the offer and neither of you will get any money. Rationally, it is logical that you would give very little money to the other player. However, in reality, people usually don't decide very rationally in this game. So game theory seems all very logical and precise, but the truth is that people don't always act like rational economists. So the rules of game theory only make sense when people are negotiating cold-bloodedly in order to maximize their monetary returns. The market pricing model therefore only applies to a small fraction of human decisions. It makes sense when goods are exchanged in the open market with strangers, but not when friends or family or even business partners are involved.
Family communal sharing or home economics model is a non-rational model, or at least not considered rational for economists, that we usually use with close people, for example, our family or very close friends. Lately, this model has been used in several enterprises, teams, and CEOs, demonstrating its utility even outside of family relationships. To explain this model easily, we are going to give one example. Imagine a building is on fire. Scientific research have demonstrated that almost everyone would enter in the building, making an obviously irrational decision to save their brothers. Why? This is because if you only save yourself, you are going to save 100% of your genes, but your brothers share with you half of your genes. So, if you save both of them, you are going to save 100% of your genes. That is because it's like saving half and half of them. So the same result will be
Equality matching. Fiske's third model describes exchanges between peers or friends. In business, we cannot use the rational economic model because it's inappropriate to call and can be perceived as insulting. In fact, they are considered sociopathy people. But also the family one can be used because you don't share any gene and the biological aspects of this model have not placed. So the key is to treat sometimes with mistrusting psychology of market economics and other with trusting psychology of family relations, even they are not your relatives. The trust game. It is given an amount of money between your partner and you. And you two have to choose who is going to divide them. Your choice in the game depends on whether you trust to the other player. In this experiment, De Bruyne showed a photograph of the other person you were paired with, who were manipulated to seem a long-lost relative. So playing the game with someone who looks like a potential family member activated the king care subself and people trust in the other person's decision. Giving money to this person was like giving money to a family member. If their first is familiar, they trust more. The evolution is a family company. The key of success is to treat your corporation as a family member. People will trust and cooperate more with others if they feel like they are part of a family. In conclusion, each of ourselves negotiates according to the person we're treating with, and instead of treating a rational human, cold, objective, we have different bias depending on whom we're playing with. Those bias makes our ancestors survive. So our question is, what can be seen in the relationship between workers affected by the type of treatment? What are bias and the negative thinking? Bias are often viewed as deficient and equated with poor decision making. The fact is that in an evolutionary perspective, biases come from adaptive tendencies that help our ancestors to survive. Even these biases can lead us to errors. Evolution is more intelligent and have its reasons. One of them is false consensus bias. It's our tendency to overestimate people's decisions in order to agree with us. The second one is overconfidence bias. That is the tendency for most of us to believe we are better than the average in something. But not all errors are created equal. Biases are not random. The mind evolved not simply to be biased, but to make specific kinds of errors and not others. One example to understand this is the smoke detector dilemma. If several times has confounded fire with burning wood of the neighbor, then when we decrease the sensitivity, maybe the detector don't work properly. The question is, put more sensitive or less sensitive? In this dilemma, the detector would be the built-in decision-making systems that we all have. And it can detect two different types of errors. The false alarm, it is no smoke but the alarm sounds, and the miss, when there is fire and the alarm doesn't sound.
In order to get a better understanding of what a bias really is, two examples will be explained now. The first one is called the overconfidence bias. As said before, this is the tendency to believe we are better than average on traits. An example for this is when men are asked to rank themselves on athletic ability, 100% would rate themselves in the top 50. Mathematically, this is of course totally irrational because it is clearly not possible for everyone to be better than average. A second example is the irrational judgment of people when it comes to love and marriage. The divorcing rates are very high, and there is a high chance that people who are getting married end up getting divorced after all. Still, a great amount of people are getting married. This is because marriage is a powerful predictor of having children. So people are essentially biased to get married in order to enhance the likelihood of their genes getting replicated. So people sometimes act irrational in their judgments when it comes to love, but the underlying system is based on a rational foundation.
Even though, as we've seen before, biases are considered human errors, there are mistakes that we need to make to favor our evolution. This is easier to explain using examples. For instance, the case of the marriage. Even though we know that most marriages end up bad, we make the decision to commit to a partner. We do this because if we marry someone, it's more probable for us to have descendants, which obviously is better for human evolution. That's why, although there are mistakes, bias are needed for us humans to continue developing and evolving.
The example of love invention we have seen can make us question our environment. So, how many more biases exist to perpetuate the species and we have not even noticed? Maybe there are more human beliefs that are created to survive.